Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the Inspire series. I'm here once again with my partners in story, Karen, Josh, Holly, and Sarah. Michelle, unfortunately, can't be with us again tonight, but we have a special guest, Chris Evans, who is a marketing PR expert. He's worked around the globe for 20 years, fulfilling that role. So welcome, Chris.
Hi.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about creativity versus marketability and striking that balance in all books, but if we can target the picture book arena, there's many challenges, balancing that artistic vision with market demands, and how do we navigate all those challenges. So I guess that's a very loaded stuff that we need to break down bit by bit. So if we can just tackle the first part, Chris, creativity versus marketability, striking that balance. How do you think we as authors, can we do that? Is it possible?
I think we actually all do it consistently. And I've been giving this a lot of thought. And if you go back through history, which is a really good indicator of what happened here, if you look at Charles Dickens, part of the reason some of it doesn't make perfect sense to us now, whereas it does to historians, is actually much of what he wrote was social commentary. So he was looking at the marketability of this is people's lives, which is why he has the moniker of having invented Christmas, which is stretching things a little. But also then you've got people like Conan Doyle, who they were writing their stories for a magazine, not for a book, because he was making more money 100 and something years ago writing in magazines. So we look back now and we see he'd seen what will people pick up this magazine for? A crime story. So actually he was looking at the marketability before he was even writing the books. With all of us, there are kind of two ways of looking at the major parts of how are we making sure the market's going to want to know about our book and it's going to interest them, but also this is what we want to say. And there are two real different strands to that. The first one is always the brand. And I know we spoke about this last time. For me, I've got a brand where the word stray appears in every title, except for the next book, but we'll ignore that bit for now. And having that, people, all of a sudden, you've not only got the brand of your author that people can see, but in every title, you've got stray. The James Bond books did this. There's huge amounts of examples, some of which I won't bring up because children certainly shouldn't be reading them. But this whole branding side of, if people see this constant, what my brand is and who I am, the chances are they're going to go and buy the book. The other strand is the topics we write about, which can be slightly more complex. We're very fortunate in many ways as authors that we have quite a long run time until our book comes out. In other ways, it can be a nightmare. There was, when AI really took off last year, I think it took 24 hours for somebody to self-publish the first totally AI written book. For your own mental health, don't bother trying to read it. It is the worst book ever written, because it's great saying, write me a thriller book. It's not going to work. So the whole AI thing is slightly overblown anyway. But seeing someone do that so quickly, actually, as children's authors and illustrators, we can't do that. We need that 12 to 18 month runtime, because that's how long it will take the book to come out. So really the topics we focus on are the loss, the bullying, what's mattered to kids throughout their lives. The latest one that's come up over the last 10 to 15 years is the environment and how we treat the environment with plastics. So really, instead of looking at what's happening today or tomorrow, our role is more taking on what's long term. what's going to still be affecting people in 5 years? Unfortunately, bullying, loneliness, loss, the environment, and many other topics are always going to be there. And if you can home in on them, which is actually in all of our writing, when I wrote my first book, I had people contacting me going, this is a really good anti-bullying book, other people coming up with other messages in it. I hadn't even realized I'd put the messages in there because I didn't go about it that way. My way of taking it was, I'm looking at my stray dogs and I'm writing a book. So I had a completely different vision, but other people took other things from it. And I think that's one of the opportunities we really have. Yes, we have an overall topic of, we're talking about loss or the environment or whatever, but the story that covers that and drags people in is highly likely to have even more messages going on. And that's why putting our artistic talent with our marketing is actually quite difficult. Because if we let the marketing just run our story, to be honest with you, we're going to fail, because we're going to be out of time by the time that latest bubble has burst. It's fine if you're writing a daily newspaper. It's not great if you're writing a book. So we need to be far more kind of overreaching with what topics we're looking at. And if you look at all the successful children's books, they all are. You know, look at Karen and Josh over the last couple of months with the whole, as you can tell, I've been following your social media quite closely. With the new books coming out, environment, the loss, the grief, it's really good messaging and it's things kids need. When I then take that and look at Amazon and the advice, particularly on self-publishing you're given, of choose your keywords carefully, choose which categories you want to be in, and find the one that's the path of least resistance. Yes, that's useful, but sometimes that path of least resistance has suddenly taken away all your marketing because it's the wrong place to be. So that little bit of competition, actually, we should all welcome it, because we should have that little bit of ego going, yeah, I'm good enough to succeed even if there's competition, because we're authors and it's a very busy marketplace. So we have to have that little bit of self-belief. But having that, going out in your local community going, this is our book. Karen can talk a lot about this over the last couple of months, I know, because how successful that's been. Talking about grief, as Josh does, all of these things coming together and seeing how effective we can all be is really quite inspiring. And you suddenly realize, actually, write your book, then the main thing to focus on to bring it into the marketing side is actually just the title and the front cover, because the content of the book is always going to be about what you want to write. If you start writing what other people want you to write, you end up where I ended up this week, with someone asking me to write a 5,000 word short story. And then when I saw the title, went, oh, that's what people think of me, which didn't make me feel great. And I'll keep that title quiet for the moment. So it can work against you. But this whole having the artistic vision, that's what we do. We like being creative. We wouldn't do this if not. If you go into being an author just looking at it as a job, your books are going to get boring very quickly. Most jobs become processes, and that's what writing will then become. None of us want that. And thankfully, with people that stick it through, you rarely see that happen. People give up because they're seeing it as a job and purely a way to raise money. The money will come, but you need patience. But the marketing side of taking this artistic vision is very much your front cover, your title, and your back cover blurb, which, as we mentioned last time, actually was probably the first thing you wrote before you even started writing the book, or at least the skeleton of what you need to put on there, which explains to people what you're talking about. It puts across what that deep lying message is. And parents remember the books they read as children that resonated with them. That's what we're trying to do for the next generation. And at the moment, the world is in a little bit of a scary place, whether that's the media making us scared or whatever. There's a lot of angst and anxiety around. And our job as children's authors, it's not going to go away for quite some time. The environment, as much as anything else, will make that stick there. So we're trying to help children in what we do, whether it be through illustrating all the words we use, actually navigate what we went through when we were kids. And the marketing side of that will come from, yeah, this is what I went through as a kid. Actually, I'm an expert, so I can help kids through this. And this is where the business marketing comes in more than the consumer marketing, as it were. Actually, we're experts in what we do. The stories we're telling are because of what we've been through, and we're sharing it. And if we can put ourselves across marketing wise as experts without it being a textbook, then really we're hitting the holy grail where parents and kids are enjoying the books, but they're getting the message and learning as they go through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Just
already.
Just with you saying that, thinking about Karen and Josh and Sarah and how they're putting themselves out there, you know, they've lived through what? Their books. I say that right? They're living through their books. You know, like Sarah, you've said to me in conversations we've had how you've experienced grief yourself, and Josh, you just write about you and what you experienced as a kid, and Karen with Ashbel Harbour and your book Home, you've written about stuff that you know about that was so relevant to you. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a really, really good point. The content is always there, and if it comes from within, that just adds so much to your marketing, to your PR, and it's not just.
You have to feel the story, and
you've got to feel it. Yeah.
You have to feel it.
Sorry, Josh.
I was going to say the audio producer, the music producer, Rick Rubin, in his latest documentary or thing he's done, he just said, always write and create for yourself. Don't try and go, that's the market, I'm going to try and hit that. Even though that, you go, oh, I want to be rich, I'll do that. But no, when you always bring it back to yourself and go, I'm going to write this book for myself, I'm going to heal myself, I'm going to share my experiences or whatever, and you put that out there, then you're going to have more of a deeper connection with your audience, even though your audience may only be 5 people, but you're going to connect with them on a deeper level than you are just spreading yourself too thin and doing that way. And that's what, I suppose that's what I do. All I write about is what I experienced as a child and what I wanted to know as a kid. And I put that into books, make it fun, make it quirky, put it out there, and then see what happens. Simple as that.
Well, I found doing a free calendar for people to download, it's actually a calendar made up of photos of the actual stray dogs I've written about. And
that's good. So it links back.
Yeah, people can download it. All 12 dogs. Well, actually, it's 11 dogs and a cat. But
did you put links in back to your books in the calendar?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
so it's got an introductory page. Everything is there, and it's free, so people are a lot happier. And the only reason it came about, I saw the local dog charity, stray charity, they were putting out a 2025 calendar. I did tip them off they got the wrong year, but it didn't seem to work. So I put this out, and I spoke to the local newspaper and said, look, I'm putting it out. It's totally free. And he said, so there's no money going to anywhere? I said, no, so it's probably not a story. And he went, no, it's raising awareness. Yet another story in the local newspaper. which I'm sure is what helped the amount of downloads. And this is kind of the thing. What that calendar did was show, yeah, what I'm writing about is my own experience. And I think that's such a powerful message for us all to have, because it shows we know what we're talking about because we've lived it. And I think that's a really important way of looking at, yes, our artistic sides there, but because, as I used the word experts earlier, we have that too. And I think when people see that, that's when they start going, hang on, I want to be part of this world.
You also, when you're a children's author or illustrator, like you write it as a child, not as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is true, Karen. I write it so my 8-year-old can actually read it and understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, and hope maybe for Josh, you're doing it for that 8-year-old that you wished you'd had that, or at the time, maybe, or whatever. So you've got the wisdom coming in.
Yeah, exactly. That is so true. Yeah.
Yeah. Child. And for me, I love where I live with our Shell Harbour, and I love the environment, and I believe it should be protected. And the book is showcasing it to say, please don't destroy it, and love it and always appreciate it. But I also know from teaching, kids need that connection to place and to be proud of where they come from. And when a book's beautiful and powerful and strong, and they can go, look, this is where I come from, very powerful.
They get a sense of that, don't they? A deep sense of that. And that's the same thing with Sarah's book, The Heavy Bag, about grief.
Like, it's not just books for other people in other places. Like, this is my place. And you see that often. Or the kids got to see themselves in it somewhere, somehow. That's why they connect to it.
Identifying with
the characters, and the story, the place. Somehow they connect. Or they may want to go to another place, but they want to go with that character because they love that character. Or they want to know, how did that character overcome that grief? I can maybe do it that way. Or Holly, you're into self-help a lot, aren't you?
Yes.
And that's coming out in picture books too a lot, and how you approach it. And you have that wisdom. And if you're working on a child's book, that's going to come through in your work. Yours comes through. And Jennifer looks for that as a publisher. You're looking at it through the eyes of a child as well as a publisher. And how is that child going to see that and connect to that? And the child in you must connect to the story, or you wouldn't look at it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think, because that's a really interesting point, do you think actually that's not just children? It goes through the parents being able to connect when they're reading with them as well.
That's a huge factor.
Huge. Yeah. It's their child-like self in there too that they're connecting to.
Well, the parents basically buy picture books for the kids. The kids rarely go through
everything.
Yeah.
And the grandparents.
Exactly.
That's what I'm finding. It's
What was that?
Grandparents. The grandparents.
Oh. So are you hitting a nostalgia spot with the grandparents with your book?
All ages, from newborn.
Yeah, but the grandparents are going, I want my grandkids to experience what I enjoyed about this area.
Might know, or they'll go, my kids did this, so I'm going to get it. My grandkids too. And my daughter or son will love this. And I know they're buying it as a surprise for their own kids, but also for the grandkids. It just connects on, I
love that. I love that.
It's a really strong part of marketing, isn't it? Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, I think with your book, Karen, because we're talking about it being generational earlier, I think that the illustrations could be in any decade. When I look at it, it just I just think you just chose really well with your illustrator, because I think the style doesn't depict it in one decade or another.
Yeah.
Has
And I
been
think that's just speaking to everybody.
23 years, and I think her experience and her wisdom, not just her talent, came out as well in her illustrations. And because she's done the book, she's also, people have seen it and she's getting even more work.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant. That's what you
Yeah.
want. That's great.
Good. Yeah.
She deserves it. And I didn't tell her how to illustrate it. She had to connect to the manuscript or she wouldn't accept the work. So I was really thrilled because I went, who, me? She goes,
Oh,
no, she goes, I fully connect to this manuscript. It's so well written and so well done. And I went, what? Because I'm emerging, and like for someone with that experience, I went, oh my goodness, like that is just the bee's knees for me, for you to tell me that. Like, I'm like, oh my God. I was like, that's the best thing I've heard. Like,
yeah. I was going to say actually that we're talking about creativity and marketability, and I think we hear a lot of obviously especially self-published authors, because you know we have that say over our illustrators more so than traditionally published, although that can happen. I think I hear a lot of authors that want to self-publish a picture book, and they're looking for illustrators, and they say, well, I like this illustrator's style and I like that style, I don't like that style, and that's what's guiding them. But actually what I've learned is what's really important with your illustrator as well, to go from the creativity to the marketability. What's their intentions? How do they work? How are they also going to market the book alongside you? Because with a picture book, we know the pictures tell part of the story. It's just as important. So how are they going to help to market the book? There's nothing worse than finding an illustrator because you just really like their style, which is obviously very important, but they don't go beyond illustrating the book, because the audience really do want to see how this book visually came to life, and they want to see these little videos of the illustrator and how they came up with the characters and their process. And then, you know, there are things that would help if you had both of you there for interviews, and they're sharing on their social medias, you know, all this kind of marketability. If that falls short and they stop only at the book, that can sometimes be harder for you. So although, yes, absolutely, it's important that we go with styles that we like, but I would say as well, look at that illustrator, look at how they do their marketing, look at their intentions, look at their thoughts, you know, what are they putting out on social media as well? Because I think that's also something really important to be aware of, because when you go into that market from the whole creative side, that's where it's going to count. Because if they stop dead at the illustrations, it's going to be a lot harder the other side, because there's been numerous times where, you know, a book's been published, but I've still gone back to my illustrator and said, oh, could we do this? Or someone's asked for this, or, you know, and she's been more than happy to do that. I couldn't imagine if it was just a no. So I think that's to kind of keep in mind.
Well, it also depends on how they're contracted as well, Sarah. You know, they could be contracted just to a one-off fee to illustrate the book, or to get, you know, either a one-off fee or to get a commission, a royalties thing, a split between, you know, the author and the illustrator. If they have a commission, a royalties thing, they're more likely to be invested to promote it, as opposed to, okay, I've just done my job, I've got, you know, $1,000 or a couple of $1,000 or whatever it is, I'll just move on to the next one. Do you know what I mean? So it also, that depends on how they're worked into it in that regard.
It depends on the illustrator's experience and profile. It's not just like, oh, I've paid you and I'm finished. I didn't know what I was getting for the illustrations because I trusted the creativity process, but I knew it was going to be exceptional. And that's
Yeah,
all.
that's a big thing to trust in that regard, especially in
Yeah.
yeah. But obviously, you had published through Jen though, didn't you?
Jen's published for me, and Jen, so because they're trade published, Jen chose Elisa for home.
Yep.
And it blew my mind because Elisa is Russian, but she's a perfect choice. But there was
that's
no way,
stunning. I love that
no
cover.
way I was going to go to Jen and say, oh, I don't think you should pick that person, blah, blah. It should be an Australian or whatever it should be. That's not my role. My role was writer. I've signed a contract. The publisher's role is their vision when they're doing it, and they have the eye for it. And Jennifer had the eye for this, not me.
Karen, can I tell you that I actually found you through social media, through the cover of that book? I saw the cover come up on my Instagram, and I was like, wow. And I clicked on it, and then I found you through that cover. I was
Awesome.
so
That's interesting.
blown away by that cover, and I was like, oh, need to see that. And yeah, there you were.
And it, you know, for me, it came down to that trust. I've never met Alyssa. We did one Zoom, her being in St. Petersburg, me being in Australia. And it came down to that trust and just having that feeling like, yep, she's it.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew her social media profile. I came across quite accidentally. And it just came down to that, yep, she's the right one. And I didn't tell her what to do. I just gave her the script. And it is a huge thing to trust. But I don't know, you just know when something's right.
You do. And a tip for any illustrator listening is their Instagram profile's very important. That's how, like, I could, without Jen telling me about Elisa, I could look at her.
I must admit, you follow people like Gabriel Evans. We all heard of Gabriel Evans?
No.
Okay, he's got about 50 million followers on Facebook. He lives just about 100K south of where I do, and he's just incredible. He's illustrated about 15 books, and he's written about 10 of them. But he works his Instagram beautifully. It's almost like, Sarah, you do your Instagram absolutely amazingly, and I'm in admiration of anyone who does Instagram really well. But Gabriel Evans does it really well. So just search for Gabriel Evans on Instagram and have a look and see how he does it. That's just such a
huge part of the marketing aspect, isn't it?
It is.
And how, like, what you're doing lately, Sarah, you're combining your creativity with Insta, and it becomes a whole package.
Yes.
Holly, do you do Instagram and things like that much? I see quite a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy Instagram, and I, of course, lots of Canva stuff. So
yeah. I know that you're good on LinkedIn, Holly.
Yeah,
I enjoy chatting with you on LinkedIn because it's like this is the space where that's at. But I can't master Instagram, and I'm going to take from the last episode. We had a bit of a chat beforehand. Sarah's told me some tips. So everyone, if you're a bit bored on a Sunday afternoon, check out Insta because I'm going to try some new things.
Good.
So Chris, in your experience as someone who's been in PR and marketing, whilst we know social media is important, like we've just all been saying, it's huge, and like, Karen found Alyssa through socials, and it is that payoff. But is it the be all and end all? Like, are there avenues?
No, social media, and this is one of the things I will die on this mountain one day. Social media is only a tool. It's the same as your local newspaper, a national newspaper. Using it it's a different way of using that tool. It's the same as you wouldn't use a screwdriver the same way you use a hammer, unless you want to end up with stitches in your hand like I did. And, and with Instagram, it's really interesting because I don't have a picture book. My Instagram is very much, as Holly says, using Canva and creating images with the books, with the dogs and that kind of thing that works really well. But for me, Insta isn't my main focus, but I also know I can't forget about it. It's too important. I love Josh's idea of I'm just going to go and play. That is the best way of dealing with social media. Go and play and see what works, because there's no such thing as a here's the plan, go do it, because then everyone would do it. We're in a really crowded marketplace, and with social media, it's even more crowded. If you look and take note over social media over a 2-week period, you'll see actually you're only seeing 20 to 30 people maximum, because that's the way it works. So if you think of it that way, how are you going to get even further out there? And that's where being creative, using hashtags is very important on that as well. But I mean, it's like Jennifer says, and you've all said about you've met people on social media. That's how me and Jennifer met, but it was on a more niche site than the main social media. It was a business site. And that's actually the way it works. LinkedIn is probably the best for connecting with people. Facebook, I actually did a blog on this not very long ago. Facebook is good for actually getting out there to a wider audience. Instagram is fantastic for homing in on your audience, and particularly if what you have is a portfolio of images, things you've done, Instagram is effectively a rolling CV. It's absolutely fantastic for that, and designers love it for that, and it is what it should be. I'd love to tell you what Twitter is, but everyone gave up the ghost about a year ago and has no idea anymore, and that includes me. But it's also with social media, people are talking about the big ones. What about the smaller social media, kind of niche sites? So whether it be a business site, a children's author site, there's a lot out there. It takes a lot of research to find them, in the same way as it still is and has been for a long time, finding the right magazines you want to do interviews with or you want your news in. I mean, I can remember when I started in PR, we'll ignore the fact I was licking envelopes with press releases in them and posting them. I can still taste the glue. But we also had 3 volumes that must have been about that wide, War and Peace, each of them. And that was every journalist on every magazine in the UK. And we used to get in the post every month, replace this page, because people had moved jobs. Social media is actually the same. And Google is kind of that little book for us almost, of trying to find these niche sites. Now, the trouble is some of the niche sites you'll find are too niche and actually have 10 followers on them. Others are growing, and it's spotting the ones that you think are going to work for you. And it's a very actually personal thing. We still have this problem with social media that we've had with all other traditional forms of media for decades now. For me, clients have always gone, I want to be on the front page of the Financial Times. Well, why? What's your story? Actually, you don't either, because your customers are reading Printing Today magazine. So you don't want to be on the front page of the Financial Times. So it is finding where you want to be, where your audience is that you can talk to. I'm on a couple of social media sites just because it's support from other authors. It's not actually trying to sell. But then what I found, all those other authors were seeing my books and they were plugging them all over social media. And this is what happens. When everyone tries to help each other, it's amazing what can be achieved. And most of the time just by accident. But with social media, yes, it's important, but it is only a tool. I would always advise pick on 2 mainstream ones. So for me, I pick on LinkedIn and Facebook because it works for me. Instagram is fantastic if you've got illustrated books or you're an illustrator, because that is your rolling CV in effect.
Yeah.
So pick the ones that work for you and focus on those. Every day check in on the other ones, but if you're focused on 2 of them, that's where you'll find success. And then play with them, see what works, see what doesn't work.
Yeah.
I could totally agree with that. I stick to Instagram and LinkedIn, and I kind of, the way that I've worked out over the last few years to do it is Instagram is more like a teaser. So Josh, we were talking about reels earlier, you know, if you have like you know, 3 ways I didn't get a book deal, or 3 ways of how to, and then in your captions you put it like you're teasing people in, you can replicate that information onto LinkedIn, but then it would be solidified. It wouldn't be worded like that. It wouldn't be a teaser. You are talking to your network of, this is what happened and this is how it worked out. So I tend to kind of take the same content and split it between the 2, and I just word it differently. Obviously Instagram's more visual,
You're a
but
slightly
it's-
different audience, so
yeah, but it's the same content. Otherwise you're going to constantly be trying to do all this different content. Yeah, stick to 2 and just mold yourself slightly. Same post, but
And Holly, you do the same too, I think, between LinkedIn and Instagram. That's what I see with yours. Yeah.
I do.
And it works well. It really works well. You can see how they're linked, but yeah, 2 different audiences, same content, but 2 different. Yeah. So we're going to have
there's
to
a
leave
whole
it
other
there.
topic, you know that, don't you, Jan?
Yeah, I'll be back again.
All topics are loaded. So thank you, Chris, for joining us tonight. I think a lot of gold was dropped in this episode. There's so much to it, isn't there? It's just, we could talk for hours, but unfortunately we have to stop there. So thank you, Chris, for joining us and sharing your wisdoms. And thank you, everyone else. And I will see you all again next week.